This is Mark Brady at 177 West Main Street, formerly 129 West Main Street. It's April 1st, the year 2007. I'm sitting here with my father. We're going to go through several questions, and we're going to conduct a little interview. Just say who you are and.
My name is Francis Joseph Brady, better name as Joe. My father's name was Joe, so that's why they always called me Joe. I vaguely remember, I was born in Lowell. I can vaguely remember being in Lowell. There were two things that stood out. There was a big tree in front of our house. It was probably a cherry tree, something like that. And there was a big, a long stone wall in the field, kind of near my house, our house there. I don't know why those two things stand out, but those are the two things that stand out when we lived in Lowell. Of course, I would have been only probably 4 or 5 years old at that time. My father lost his job during the Depression, and when he lost his job, they lost the house that they had previously purchased. They had only owned it for a short while. My father had been a conductor on the Boston to Montreal run for the railroad. That's the only thing I knew about my father working there. But when he lost his job, and of course he had 8 children, and no job during Depression, things were tough because there was no such thing as welfare. You had nowhere to turn, so it became quite bad, not only for our family, but for most families, and that happened during the Depression. So my father decided to move to Millbury, where his father lived, and had a small farm at 35 Sutton Road. And he thought that maybe his father could help him in some way get back on his feet.
Didn't you live in Quinsigamon Village for a short time?
I was just about to get into that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he gathered his family together and originally to come to Millbury, but for some reason they found an apartment on Dexter Street in Worcester. That was in the so-called Quinsigamon Village of Worcester. It was mainly dominated by Swedish people at that time. I think it still is. And I can remember, I think it was the people on the second floor had a liquor distillery of some kind that they used to make their own liquor. And every once in a while, the policemen would come and they'd raid the place. I can remember the railroad ran right in back of the house that we had rented. And we used to go out, and when the railroad would come by, we'd holler at them, and they would throw coal at us. And of course, we would burn the coal in the house to help heat the house. I can remember the first day when I went down to get my library card. That library is still there in Quinsigamon Village. That stands out. I don't know why, but that's when I got my library card. And I can remember going to the small school that was right next to the library. And of course, I would have been about 6 years old at that time, I suppose. And I remember myself and some other kids used to be in a play every once in a while. I can remember I used to have pictures around somewhere that I would have like a pilgrim's hat on and that type of thing.
I saw that picture.
And then we used to roam around the neighborhood a lot. And of course, the Blackstone River went by there. And we used to go down to the Blackstone. And incidentally, we, of course, we were very poor at the time, like most people. Most people were very poor in those years of the Depression. We used to get out to the Blackstone, and we'd catch small crabs, and we'd start a little fire, and we'd heat them up and eat them. Let's see if I can remember anything else about Quincy. I don't know. Well, shortly after, my grandfather at 35 Sutton Road in Millbury had remodeled his old barn into an apartment, and he rented the apartment to my father, and so we moved to Millbury, and that's where we lived for 60 years or so. The family there.
What was your grandfather's name?
Charles,
And your grandmother?
Margaret.
Okay.
I should say that my father's father was Charles Brady. He had come over from Ireland, and for some reason he ended up in Canada. And from what I've heard, that all the people at that time that were coming over from Ireland, they landed at different places on the East Coast. And the reason they landed, for example, somebody might end up in Canada, and somebody else might end up in New York, and somebody might end up in Virginia. It all depended on the big old ships that they came over on, and they had all that bad weather in the North Sea, and the skippers of these boats would just land the best place that they could find to land, whether it be Canada or Virginia or wherever it might be. That's where they would land. Of course, most of the Irish seem to come on the East Coast around the New York area. But anyway, he ended up in Canada. And I know practically nothing about him in Canada, other than I was told that he married a woman who was supposed to have been part Indian. And Charles Brady had 4 boys. There were John, George, Charles, and my father, Joseph. And he had one daughter named Josephine. Josephine later married a guy by the name of Sherman. And for some reason,
Don't do that on the microphone.
Josie and Sherman took off to California. They decided to go out there to live, and they never came back. I always remember about Sherman. This was they did live at 33 Sutton Road for a short while, and I always remember that Sherman used to have a lot of books. He used to get these old detective books. I tell you about John Dillinger and all these different guys, and he used to let us see his books. George Brady worked at the American Steel and Wire up in Worcester. John Brady went to work for General Electric, and he became an executive with General Electric. He had a very big job. My father went to work for Morgan Construction Company here in Worcester, in Lincoln Square. Incidentally, where his son, my brother John, and my brother Charlie worked there, and I worked there for, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year, I guess.
Yeah, you were a timekeeper?
I was a timekeeper. We used to work 12 and a half hours a night.
Right.
We'd go in at 6 o'clock and get through at 6:30 in the morning, because that was just before the war, and they were preparing for the war and so forth.
Did Grandpa get you that job? Grandpa, your father? Is that how you got in there?
Yeah. He got me and John, my brother John, and my brother Charlie. My brother John and Charlie were both machinists. I had no inclination to be a machinist. It just wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
I should say about growing up here what is called the Bremenville section of Millbury. We, of course, were very young, probably 7 or 8 years old when we came down from Worcester, and we went to school on Burbank Street. There was a school there that it was torn down about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I guess. That's where we went to school. And I can remember that I was one of the patrol leaders. They had a thing that you wrapped around your shoulders
Right.
and your waist. And I was supposed to make sure that the kids got back from school, stay out of the streets and the road and so forth. This neighborhood had about 50, just right, the neighborhood, what we call Bremenville, at Briley's Pond. There were 15 boys, all about the same age. And we played all kinds of games. We had a baseball team, we had a football team, we had a basketball team, we had a hockey team. We used to make our own road races. We run road races of 2 and 3 miles. Of all the kids in this immediate neighborhood, I was the best athlete. And I always was a good athlete ever since I was a little kid. Now, don't misunderstand me when I say about a good athlete. I'm talking about in the little Bremenville section of Millbury. I was the #1 athlete.
Right.
I'm not saying I was the best in the town of Millbury or so forth and so on. But I was always playing all the time. I played hockey all day long, or baseball, or foot. Because mainly football. We'd have football games. We didn't practice much. We used to play over across from Briley's, over across the pond, and it was all full of rocks. How we never got hurt, I'll never know.
Right.
I'll never understand that.
And you were just telling me Uncle John was an outstanding track performer in track and field, and of course Uncle Dick was an outstanding baseball player.
Oh, he certainly was, yeah. Charlie went off to trade school. The only one of the boys that went off to trade school. I was in Millbury High School, and one of the most proud things that happened to me when I was in Millbury High School, today I think of it often. Like walking home from baseball practice as a freshman, and Steve
Beaton?
Beaton, the coach, gave me a uniform. I had made the team as a freshman. I was the only freshman on the team. Well, I was one proud kid, I'll tell you, walking home with my baseball uniform.
That's great. You were a left-handed pitcher?
I was a left-handed pitcher, yeah. I was very thin. I probably weighed about 140 pounds. I didn't have any strength to speak of, and I used to throw a lot of curveballs. Because kids, it ruined my arm. That happens with kids all the time. They start throwing curveballs. They don't have the strength. So that just about ended my career as far as baseball was concerned, because I just couldn't pitch anymore. My arm was so sore.
I guess you spoke about your father a little bit. How about Grandma? How about your mother up there?
My mother,
She took care of the house?
mainly, my mother stayed home and took care of the family. But there's a thread mill right down the street from the house here, and eventually she ended up getting a job in that thread mill because she needed the income. And she worked there for a while. I don't know, I would guess maybe for a couple of years. And then I suppose I'd have to go into World War II was coming up about 1939 and 40.
Well, before you do that, how about telling us about all the different jobs you had, starting with
Oh, boy.
picking blueberries? And
Well, when I was a little kid, I soon found out that if I wanted to have spending money, I would see other kids in the neighborhood who went to the store and buy an ice cream cone. I never had any money to buy the ice cream cones. So I soon realized that if I wanted money to buy ice cream cones and whatever, I was going to have to work for it, because my family just didn't have the income. So I started doing a number of things, many things. I picked blueberries and sold them throughout the neighborhood, going house to house. The hill behind our field was covered with beautiful laurel. People from all over used to come and stop the cars and look at that laurel because it was a beautiful sight on that hillside. And it suddenly dawned on me, well, if they're coming to look at that laurel so great, they would probably like to be able to get a hold of some of that laurel. So, sure enough, I would go up on the hill and pick a lot of laurel and come down in front of our house and stand on the side of the road with a great big bunch of laurel. And the cars would stop, and they were only too happy to get the laurel, and I used to get 75 cents for it. Boy, I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
This making money is easy. So let's see if I can think of anything else that I did. Oh, well, yeah, of course, that would be getting into the high school. Let's see if I can think of anything else I did.
Well, yeah, it says you talked about working at the dairy.
Oh, that's, yes. So now you're getting into when I was at school. When I was in high school, as a freshman, every morning I worked for Marcus Payne's dairy farm up in West Millbury. And his driver was Cecil Murray. He used to drive his milk truck. And I would stand on the running board of the milk trucks, and we would deliver milk all over the town of Millbury before I went to school. And after school, I got a job at the First National store at the center of town, and I worked there after school and Saturdays.
So that you left the baseball team?
I left the team mainly because of my arm. I just couldn't pitch anymore. It was very painful. And there was no way I could continue playing ball.
Says you also had a paper route.
Oh yeah, of course I had a paper route, the Sunday route. I remember the papers were very, very heavy. It seems to me I had like 50 or 60 papers, and I used to deliver papers from about a quarter of a mile radius around my home to all the homes. And I remember the money I saved from that. My mother had a little bank up at the house, and I used to put money in that bank, and that's how I got my first bike.
Yeah, it says $18.
$18 over at Sears Roebuck.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. Even in those eyes, that was a lot of money.
Yeah. Now, somewhere in all of this, you must have met Mom in the neighborhood.
Well, she lived here, right here.
About how old were you when you met her? Do you remember?
Well, she was here all the time I was here, growing up at the same time.
Yeah. So when you moved here
I moved here about when I was roughly 6 years old. She would have been about 3.
Okay.
And of course we lived here, and then as we got a little bit older, we'd meet down at the pond here. Everybody would go swimming down at the pond. So that's why I would see her all the time. And so now I guess we get into after school. When I graduated from Millbury High School in 1940. Of course, the war was upon us, so I can remember the morning walking down, I should say before that, your mother and I had been dating, because at that time I would have been about 18, 19 years old. We had been dating for quite a while. And I remember the night before I was to leave, the night before I was to leave to go to Fort Devens, me and I got together and I told her that she should not be sitting around the house waiting for me to come home, because you don't even know if I'm going to come home. I said, you should go out and enjoy yourself. At your age, you should be going to dances. You should be dating. You should go to parties. You should do whatever you want to do. and maybe sometime later I'll get home. So I reported over to Fort Devens, and me and about a couple hundred other guys were assigned to the 594th Engineer Boat and Shore Regiment.
Now, wait, before, did she have any reaction, or did she respond to, when you asked her that, when you told her that, did she,
I don't recall what she said.
but you had that conversation?
Yeah, I don't recall what she said. I think she just listened to me, I think, you know, and what she would do while I was gone. You know, she was only a kid, you know, she was only 16 years old. And no kid 16 years old should be sitting around the house all the time. So anyway, I just left her that message, you know, that she could do whatever she wanted to do. So we ended over at Fort Devens. I always like to say that the morning I was walking down Sutton Road there, I was going to go over to Fort Devens, and they were going to teach me how to kill innocent men and children. And, well, anyway, that's the outfit I was in all the time, the 3 years I was in the service. For some reason, over at Camp Edwards, Camp Edwards, what am I thinking? Not Camp Edwards, Fort Devens. Fort Devens. For some reason, they sent me out to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, to practice telegraph. And that lasted for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months, whatever it was. And I was sent back to Camp Devens. And I used to go to New York City by myself on weekends. And
What would you do in New York City?
mainly just walk up and down the streets, up in Times Square. And I met girls from time to time. One of the girls I met there, she took me out to Brooklyn Prospect Park, I think they call it out there. And I think she took me to their house. And I remember we had fancy boots, like paratroop boots. But of course, we were associated with the water, so that was the reason we had those kind of boots. I remember a photographer came by one day, and he took me over behind St. Patrick's Cathedral, and he took pictures of me with my boots on and all that jazz. I never saw anything about it. I never saw anything in the paper about it or anything. But, so from there, we left Fort Devens. We went down to Camp Edwards on the Cape. And then we had about 50 landing boats in our company. Landing boats, these are small 60-foot boats that can go right up onto the beach. And what you do is you can transfer soldiers, infantrymen, tanks, just about anything, smaller tanks, not great big tanks, smaller tanks, and bring them up onto the beach. And we would practice that down at the Cape. One of the places that we went was Pompanesett Beach, overlooking Pompanesett Beach, and we were up there with 50 caliber machine guns. They had us shooting at airplanes carrying a sleeve to practice our shooting 50 caliber machine guns. I always used to think, well, that pilot's got a lot of courage, I'll tell you. I was never that good with guns. I don't care what kind of guns it was, but that was our job, so we did it and did the best we could. Of course, we had a 50 caliber gun on the boat, on the small boats that we had.
What kind of boats? Do you remember what kind of boats they were? The boat you were on?
LCM boats. They call them LCM boats. Yeah. That's a small boat, 60, rugged, very strong boat. They were made in Michigan, I believe, Flint, Michigan. I know they were strong because we got caught out in the ocean sometimes in violent storms. How those boats didn't sink, I'll never know. Boy, they were really put together.
So you were back in Fort Devens,
So I'm back in Fort Devens, and from Fort Devens, of course, we went down the Cape, and we trained on the Cape for quite a long time, until finally the whole outfit was sent out to Camp Gordon Johnson, that's down in the where they just had that bad hurricane. What do they call that? Down in there.
Katrina?
What do they
New,
call it?
New,
The
New
Gulf?
Orleans?
Do they call it the
Gulf of New Mexico?
No, they don't call it the Gulf, but it's west of Florida.
Oh,
Is it
the
Maine?
Panhandle?
Yeah, that's it.
The Florida Panhandle.
Down in the Panhandle. It was about 40 miles south of Tallahassee. And we trained down there for quite a long time. It's long, I don't know, 6 months. Let's say 6 months. Because that was right on the ocean. And we could train with our boats. On these boats, there was 3 people: a coxswain, an engine man, and a seaman. The coxswain was generally some kid that probably came from down North Carolina, South Carolina. That probably his family had always fished for a living, so he knew all about he knew a lot about the ocean and so forth. So he would be the coxswain, and then we'd have an engine man who knew something about engines. And I didn't know anything about an engine, so I ended up as being the seaman on the boat. Now down at Camp Gordon Johnson, we got onto a troop train, the whole outfit, got on the troop train and went to California, Camp Stockton in California. I can remember the long ride out there, and I used to stand out on the caboose of the railroad train there. You could see better, you know. They talk about tumbleweeds when you're going through the Midwest. You can see that. And we went by the canyon, the Grand Canyon, and it was a long trip for the whole outfit on that train. Well, we were in Stockton, I don't believe, 2 weeks. When one night about midnight, they took us all up to the harbor, and we went up on a troop ship, the whole bunch of us. I remember it was a long, steep thing, and there was one kid that didn't want to go. His name was Berman. And it was funny that, I suppose it wouldn't be funny, but it seemed funny that he would not go up that thing. He just wasn't going to go. And he would hold on so tight, they'd have 3 or 4 guys trying to drag him up there. You know, I'm not going, no. So the last I saw him, he was still hanging on there. We were going up the ramp. And so we get up in this boat.
So this probably would have been 1940?
That would have been 1941, probably. Probably 40. Late 40, or early 41.
Before Pearl Harbor?
Oh no, way after Pearl Harbor.
Well, Pearl Harbor was December 41, so it must have been after that
Oh,
then.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, they packed us in there. At the time, they packed us in because we went down in the very bottom of the ship, way down in the belly of the ship, and there were 4 cots, just about that wide for your body to sit in, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4 down in there. We were packed in there like sardines. When you think of it now, you know, horrible. And especially when I think of it now, at the time I didn't give it any thought, but I think of it now and I think to myself, if a Japanese torpedoed one of these boats, the torpedo would come right through naturally down at the level of the ocean. It would hit you right into the thing would come right into the belly of the ship.
Yeah.
We'd all be stuck in there.
So where did you go? Where did you sail to?
Well, I'm just going to get into that. that stuck out in me at the time, and it, it makes you wonder. You know, see, that's what it is when you're a young kid. You don't think about those things. See, I never gave that a thought. I remember one thing I used to listen to down there, laying in that cot, 4 high. I always had Sinatra on, singing all his beautiful songs, you know. So we would go up on deck quite often. We could go up on deck almost all the time if we wanted to, you know, between meals and so forth, because there wasn't much you could do. The place at the boat was so crowded, there was hardly any room to do anything. So you could go up on deck, and it took us 28 days. And all of a sudden, we saw some green grass and green trees, and it was New Guinea. There's a lot of little islands that go into the bay. And the ironic part about that is that the bay was Milne Bay, Milne. And my sister Agnes married a guy by the name of Charles Milne. And that's where we landed. And of course, there was a lot of troops here. And it was muddy, horribly muddy. You know, they tried putting planks of wood down so that you could walk around a little bit and it wouldn't get quite so muddy. And then we worked our way up New Guinea, up the coast. We went to Ley, Boona, Finchhaven, Hollandia, that I can think of going up the coast. And from Hollandia, but when we were up at Hollandia, they sent our company over to New Britain. And I understand they sent us over there because there were 60,000 Japs on one edge of the island, and we landed on the other, totally on the other side of the island. We carried Australian infantrymen in our boats. There was a big company of Australian infantrymen. And I guess the idea of the whole thing was to hold the Japanese there. But when I think of it now, the Japanese couldn't go anywhere. Because by then, we controlled the Pacific by air.
Now, what year might that have been?
Well, that would have to be, I guess,
43?
43 or 44,
Yeah.
someplace in there. But I really don't understand why we had to be there to control the Japanese, because they couldn't go anywhere. And we stayed there quite a while. They had a good ball field there. The Australian kids were good ball players. And we used to do some fishing too with our boats. We'd make our own fishing, just some very heavy type string with some. We'd make like a hook out of some metal and just troll, and we'd catch these great big fish, you know. Then we went back to New Guinea, and we were back on New Guinea for a while. We're getting ready to go up to the Philippines because we were told that the invasion of Japan was scheduled to start in what they thought might be 3 months. And we were training in New Guinea, exercising and so forth and so on. And while doing that, I severely injured my right leg. What I did was I popped a cartilage in my leg. We were playing volleyball, and when I came down, I was playing the net, and when I came down, my foot went into a small hole, and it popped the cartilage. The pain was horrible. Amazing how painful it was. So they brought me back to my tent in my cot, and they put me on my cot, and they went and got the Captain Egan. And he came in and he looked at me and he looked at the foot, and he could see that I was in a lot of pain. So he went and he got a hold of Major O'Brien, who was the only doctor in the area. And he came in and he looked at me, and he said, there's nothing we can do with that. Like, we don't have anybody here that could handle that type of situation. We don't have the material, we don't have the doctor, we don't have this, we don't have that. He said, you'll have to go back to the States to get it fixed. And I said, well, I don't know why. I said, the doctor, I said, the major, I don't want to go back there, because if I go back there, they're going to fix my leg, and they're going to send me to some other outfit. And I've been with this outfit now for 2 years, all these same guys, and I don't want that to happen. So I don't know exactly what was said after that, but he did. The last thing he said was, okay, then we'll wait until we get to the Philippines, and maybe they can fix it for you up there. So that's how that came about.
So you left, where was it?
We left, the entire outfit left New Guinea
Right.
for the Philippines, with the thought in mind that we were going to invade Japan. I got to the Philippines, they put me in the hospital immediately because I couldn't do anything with that leg. I was in the hospital 28 days, had the operation there, and I was tied up for another 3 or 4 weeks, so you can just imagine how much damage was done to that leg. So I can remember around the tents, the talk was that we were going to invade Japan in 2 or 3 weeks. And one day, all of a sudden, everybody started hollering out outside their tents, and the war was over. They had dropped the atomic bombs, and the war was over. Now, the most ironic thing that I think I ever heard of, I can think of all these things that happened to me when I was in the service. For the life of me, I can't remember how I got home. I don't understand that.
You can't remember that part?
Now, that would be the part that you'd be the most happy about, that you were going home. For the life of me, I can't tell you. I don't understand that. That's crazy.
Well, do you remember getting home?
Well, I remember coming when I got home, that I went up to your mother's place where we worked up at Cedars, the law firm in Worcester there, and picked her up there. Of course, as soon as we got to Devon's, they discharged us, so we were sent home.
Yeah. Did she know you were home?
No. I walked into her office, and
Oh, right.
yeah, and the few girls working there, and the Cedar brothers were there, I guess. Well, so anyway, we took a cab home, and so now I'm back. But I think of that often about coming home. Like, I can remember going out there on the troop train from Camp Gordon Johnson to Camp Stockton, California. I can remember on the train, watching all these different things and all that. Coming home, nothing. It's a blank. It's total blank.
That's strange.
Well, anyway, we get home. Your mother and I were married in 57. And, of course, the kids came right along, one right after the other.
That would be 1947.
Isn't that what I said?
Yeah, 57. Okay.
47. And the children kept coming along, one every year. And, we had 4 boys and 8 girls. And I didn't know what I was going to do for a living. I had no idea what I was going to do for a living. And I went to work in Morgan's and working at 12 and a half hours a night, 62 and a half hours a week, and doing that foolish job as a timekeeper, and I wasn't happy there. So I just told my father, I'm leaving. I don't like this. So I didn't know what I was going to do. So somebody told me to go up to Clark and take an aptitude test, which I did. And they said the aptitude test said I should get into sales, which I did. I answered an ad in the paper for a salesman for the food division of American Home Products. And I remember this was in the old Bancroft Hotel up there, and the guy's name was Goff, Goff. And I got the job. I was there 38 years. Traveled all around Western Worcester County, and it was the kind of thing that if I got to work for a living, it was something I liked doing. They gave me a company car. I had about probably 23 company cars and 38 brand new company cars, I was
I think I totaled one of those company cars, didn't I?
beautiful, beautiful car. That was a beauty of a car. And I was a little shook up about it, but I got no trouble at all. Nobody built. Will Feeney was my boss, and nobody said a word. Just they got me another car. It was amazing, and I got to travel all around Western Worcester County rather than being stuck in some place doing the same foolish job all the time. Yeah, and I met all kinds of people: rich people, poor people, good people, bad people, all nationalities, and I kind of got an education by doing my job. I started working when I was 9 years old. And I decided when I'm 62, that's it. Now, of course, having all those children, I didn't have very much money. But I had made up my mind that, as I said, I started at 9. It's now 62. I think that's enough. Oh, and I should tell you that during that time, I took a job as a weight and measure man for the town of Millbury. I think it paid me about $600 a year. And I did that for the extra money that would pay for our vacation at the Cape. And then an opening came on the Board of Assessors, which was I think that paid about $3,000 a year, something like that. So I was elected quite easily, and I did that. I did the weight and measure job for 25 years, and the assessor's job for 18 years, and the food division of American-owned products for 38 years. I guess I was that kind of a guy that stuck with his job. Huh? So that's we ended up these jobs. Of course, my children, Mark and especially Mark and John, were very active in the high school playing sports, and I really enjoyed watching those kids play, as all fathers do, watching their kids play ball. Matt really should have been a great ball player, but I don't know, I guess he liked fishing more than he did baseball. And Timothy died at the age of 2 months. One morning I picked him up out of his crib and he was dead. And I sit here now with all my girls, and all these kids have got all these nice jobs, all these beautiful homes, all this money. It's amazing what these kids have done. So I guess that's my story.
Okay, hold on. And then, of course, Mom passed away recently, at February 5th. And, well, you had been married how many years? Well, I guess it was 47, so 57 years. Yeah. And that was a great partnership. And as you also said, you have 23 grandchildren now.
Yeah. And I see Dick Mills just sent me some pictures of my father's father and my mother's mother. And even then, those pictures that were taken, some of them were taken in Ireland and some of them were taken up around the Lowell, Saugus area. Those men were all good-looking men. And that's where you can see that in my family, especially in the boys, you can see it. And, of course, you can see it, the mother from the kids got the mother's beauty, too. So it's amazing how I see those pictures of those people 100 years ago, and they were good-looking men. And see, that is, I don't know what you call that. It's the breeding.
Inheritance, I guess, yes.
Yeah. So all in all, things have worked out just great, just great.
Yeah. And
I'm sitting here in this great big house all alone.
Yeah. and Mom being gone, and you're okay. I mean, you feel okay. You had a good life with her,
Oh yeah.
and you get a lot of support now here in the house
Oh,
with all the girls.
amazing. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We have no financial worries. Even though when you have a great big bunch of kids like that, people say even today when somebody will mention that, and how did you ever do it with all those kids? Blah 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 blah. We never had any trouble really. We always had enough to eat. We weren't denied anything other than we probably didn't have the best clothes 40 years ago, 50 years ago, because you were voted the
Best dressed in the
Oh, you like
class,
that?
yes. But I remember we always had great food in the house.
Yeah.
I remember sometimes you went out of the house, you didn't have whole lot of money in your pocket, but the food, we always had tremendous food because you were in the grocery stores all the time.
Now, see what you just said? That's an amazing thing. I used to go out of the house in the morning sometimes. I didn't have any money. I used to stop down to Marty's. And Marty would give me a couple of bucks. That's how tight the money was. But that didn't mean the end of the world was going to come down because everything worked out fine.
Yeah, well, I think we've all done very well, and it's a tribute to you and Mom, and we've all made good lives. We all have great families and great children, and I think it's a lot to do with you and Mom and the way we were brought up. So
Beautiful.
it's a great
grandchildren.
thing. Yeah.
Beautiful kids.
Okay, and I guess unless you have anything else you want to go over, I think we'll leave it at that.
That's my speech for today.
All right then.